Hi, do you find yourself turning to food because you feel stressed and overwhelmed? Well, welcome to the club. You are certainly not alone. Emotional eating is as common as breathing in our modern day life, and this makes perfect sense because we live in a chronically overwhelmed world. I'm Lori Montry, a trauma informed eating psychology coach that specializes in helping you overcome your unwanted patterns with food by getting to the underlying reasons for your food and body challenges. So, give your finger a little workout by hitting the subscribe button for this video so that I can be sure to get you and everyone else wanting and needing food and body freedom useful content. I would really appreciate that. Now, it's so easy to understand why we turn to food when we're struggling. Food gives us a hit of feel good brain chemicals. It soothes our nervous systems through the process of chewing and swallowing. It provides companionship, excitement, and comfort. It's no wonder that most, if not all, people turn to food at some point to help them get through the day. We have needs, and food is a way of getting them met. Here's the problem though. Using food to deal with stress and overwhelm and other difficult emotions, it doesn't solve the underlying challenges. In fact, it's a distraction from what you really need. Turning to food instead of meeting the underlying need, it's a form of abandonment because it shoves down what's really going on and leaves the part of you that's asking for help all alone. Now, there's nothing morally wrong with emotional eating, and it makes absolute sense why you would do it. But it's a band aid instead of what you really need to heal and provide for your needs. Even if emotional eating didn't cause extra weight and health concerns, it would still be worthwhile to find out what you're really needing and start providing it for yourself. Because providing for your real needs, it allows you to live a life of freedom and authenticity. When you're good enough, not perfect at providing for your needs, you no longer have to rely on inconsistent willpower to avoid extra food. You simply don't think about food unless you're hungry. And that's freedom. So in this video, I'm going to share some information with you about one of the biggest reasons you turn to food, and that's an overactivated nervous system. When you're feeling stressed and overwhelmed, your nervous system becomes dysregulated. Now, since your brain knows that food helps calm your system, it leads you to food as quickly as it can. But what if you had other tools and practices that you could use to work with your system that were even more effective and didn't involve food? You would learn to rely on those tools and practices instead of food. Rather than white knuckling yourself through an urge to eat, you could pull out your tool belt, select the right tool for the job, and support your system without needing food to do it for you. And the amazing thing is that these tools and practices are working to heal your nervous system. They're helping you return to your natural state so that your urges become less frequent and you experience more of life and more of yourself. This is why nervous system regulation is one of the three major keys that I teach in my Freedom from Emotional Eating course. Working with your nervous system, it's not a quick fix endeavor. It takes understanding, patience, and consistency, but the results are absolutely worth the effort. A healthy, well-regulated nervous system not only helps you overcome challenges like emotional eating, but it also helps you end other coping and avoidance behaviors that feel out of alignment with who you are ready to become, right? It allows you to claim a more peaceful, joyful, and authentic life. Now, over the next few weeks, I'm going to be sharing more information and resources with you to help you work with your nervous system. In this first video of the series, I'm going to be explaining how your nervous system and your relationship with food are connected. And then in upcoming videos, I'm going to give you an introduction to some of the most effective tools for your nervous system tool belt. Now, I learned the importance of the nervous system and its role in helping us overcome emotional eating kind of the hard way. I first learned it with myself, and then early on in my practice, I could put the people that I was working with into basically two groups. It was those who were able to use the tools I was offering, and those that couldn't get themselves to use the tools. Using the tools, not using the tools. Those that used the tools had tremendous success. Their relationship with food would completely change and they would achieve freedom. They would lose weight and go on to create a new life. Because of them and because of the work that I'd done on myself to overcome this challenge, I knew I had the right tools. I really believed that if I could find a way to help those people who couldn't seem to utilize the tools and to stick with them, if I could get them to stick with the tools, they would have the same success. So I set about trying to figure out what made it so challenging for this group to use the tools in the first place. Now, if I had asked them why they couldn't stick with the tools, they would have told me because they were lazy or they were broken or some other lie. But I didn't believe that. I could see that they really wanted change. They weren't lazy. They simply had nothing to give. And that's when I took a deeper dive into trauma, the nervous system, and all things somatic. I learned that the reason many of my clients couldn't implement the tools I was teaching them was because they had dysregulated nervous systems that were stuck in survival. They were in overwhelm and literally couldn't take on anything else. Working with their nervous systems first, helping them heal from overwhelm, from trauma, from chronic stress, and giving them back capacity. That was the foundation they needed in order to change their behavior and take back their power with food. So, if you've been struggling with emotional eating and have not been able to make significant changes with your behavior with food or long term changes, I really want you to hear this. There's nothing wrong with you. You may just be living in a state of survival and overwhelm that keeps you stuck in your unwanted patterns. That's why all of my programs begin by laying the foundation of a healthy nervous system. When your nervous system is regulated, you have the capacity and the energy that allows you to override the habituated pathways that have you going to food on autopilot whenever you feel stressed and overwhelmed. And I've worked with thousands of people who tell me, gosh, I felt like I had tried literally everything. And the key to change was learning about my nervous system and how to work with it. It really is a total game changer. Working with your nervous system, it is the foundation upon which all the other things that you've been trying to achieve for so long can finally be achieved. When your nervous system is running smoothly and you feel regulated, calm, alive, and resourced, you make different choices and you can implement the tools and practices that bring success. So, in order to really understand this point, I'm going to share a little bit of background on overwhelm and how it affects your nervous system and your relationship with food. And the fact of the matter is that nearly all of us have experienced some form of overwhelm in our lives. We can call these overwhelming experiences traumas, but the terminology doesn't matter so much as simply recognizing that when we experience something that overwhelms our system, it leaves a lasting change on our mind, body, and spirit. Overwhelm, it looks different for each of us. What's overwhelming to me may not be to another, depending on many factors such as the resources available at the time, the capacity of your nervous system, what else is going on in your life, and the support that you may or may not have had. Now, the model that I developed to explain what happens to your nervous system over your lifetime is a graduated cylinder model, and I'll share that with you now. So, remember those tall graduated cylinders that we used back in high school chemistry class to do experiments? You'll recall that those graduated cylinders had the numbers, 1 through 10 running up the side. And these numbers represent the state of your nervous system. So when the beaker is filled in that 1 to 3 range, you're in your ventral vagal parasympathetic state. In this state, you feel safe, social, calm, alive, resourced, and ready for life. When the beaker's filled in that 4 to 7 range, you're in the sympathetic, the fight or flight, right? And this state is all about mobilization, often mobilization for the sake of survival, right? At the higher end of this phase or this state, you may become hyper aware of your external environment, even hyper vigilant. Everything may start to feel big and threatening. Something like having to slam on your car brakes could leave you feeling shaken for hours afterwards. Then that 7 to 10 range in the cylinder is the other branch of the sympathetic state known as the dorsal vagal, the shutdown or the freeze state. In this state, you feel overwhelmed with a capital O. Everything seems so hard, and crawling under the bed is about the only thing that feels doable. Now, it's also possible to overfill your cylinder, and when it's pouring over, you're in deep overwhelm and nothing else is getting in. Ideally, you would move fluidly through the various states, spending almost all of your time in the 1 to 3 range. You might move up into the sympathetic and the dorsal vagal shutdown state from time to time, but you'd only remain above maybe a 4 or 5 range for very short periods of time. But you may be like so many people today who are living with a graduated cylinder that is rarely, if ever, in the 1 to 3 range. Rather, you may spend most of your time at the 7 level or above, which means you're living in a state of survival nearly all the time. So right about this time, I usually have people ask me, well, how did my cylinder get so full? And it's pretty simple to understand. As you had life experiences that were more intense than you could process at the time, liquid was added to your cylinder. Now, this isn't to say that all of your stressful experiences were added. Only the ones that were more intense than you could process in the moment were added. There were probably plenty of stressful experiences that you processed just fine, right? Those experiences may have felt hard at the time, but because you had the skills, the resources, the capacity to process them, they didn't add to the cylinder, to the liquid in your cylinder. But the experiences that were more than you could handle at the time, these were your personal traumas. And even if they don't seem big enough to qualify as traumas, if they were more than your system could handle in the moment, they were, and they added to your cylinder. Now, when we talk about what's overwhelming to your system, we take a lot of things into account. For example, we look at your system overall, the resources and the skills that you had available to you at the time, including who might have been there or not been there to help you, and how much was already in your graduated cylinder when the event or experience happened. So this means that stress and overwhelm are cumulative. You may be one of the many people who say, gosh, I used to be able to handle so much more than I can handle right now. And this is very easily understood when you consider that the fuller your cylinder gets, the less you can handle. Since many factors are at play, we never look at an event or an experience and decide if the event itself is worthy of being considered traumatic. Instead, we look at you as an individual, what your system experienced, and your capacity at the time. There's no evaluation whether the event was bad enough to be considered a trauma or an overwhelming life experience. So throughout your life, events such as adverse childhood experiences, day-to-day stressors, chronic pain, exposure to toxins, molds, infections, sicknesses, and other stressors that were too much for your nervous system to handle, they got added to your cylinder. And simple everyday occurrences sometimes, like being bullied, never quite living up to the expectations of others or yourself, divorce, having a depressed or emotionally unavailable parent. These are things that are often overwhelming situations for young nervous systems. And once there, the liquid in your cylinder stays until you learn the skills and tools that help you release that liquid. They say time heals everything, but that isn't true when we talk about trauma and overwhelming life experiences. Time might help, but usually it takes more than time to heal from those intense experiences because they fundamentally change the way your system operates. They change the way you see yourself, others, and the world. So as your cylinder got fuller, you notice yourself becoming more hypervigilant. You may start to see the world through a different lens, and this lens causes you to misread threats. Everything begins to feel as if it will harm you. So it's important to note that all of this, it's very natural and normal. This is how your survival system was designed to work. When you're in actual danger, you want to be hypervigilant and hyper aware of all of the dangers in your environment so that you're primed and ready for action. There's nothing broken about this, but you aren't engineered to be on watch 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In fact, you're ideally meant to be in survival mode for very limited periods of time. In the overwhelmed state, you're often triggered and feel as though you need food to help you cope with life. Conscious choice, impulse control, all of this becomes very difficult when living in survival. Your survival system causes you to reach for food to deal with the fire alarm that's going off in your mind and body. So one of the biggest keys to overcoming emotional eating is harnessing the power of your nervous system. In doing so, you can reduce the liquid in your cylinder Switch out of survival and into your higher functioning brain, right? It's your higher brain or your prefrontal cortex that can stop your hand as you reach for the chips or the ice cream and ask, do I really want this? Is this just an impulse that will pass in a few minutes? Being stuck in survival is why you feel like you're on autopilot without the ability to make a choice with respect to the food. It's why 30 minutes after eating the food, you wonder, why the hell did I do that when I knew I didn't want to, when I swore I wasn't going to do it again? After an emotional eating experience, you may feel like you weren't really there because part of you wasn't. Your higher brain wasn't on board. The solution to stop emotional eating is a little bit different for those of us who have experienced trauma and overwhelming experiences. It involves working with the nervous system to reduce the liquid in your cylinder, learn to self-regulate and self-soothe. And by doing so, you'll find that number one, you get triggered less often. And number two, even if you do, you're going to be able to navigate that trigger without needing food to cope. So we've covered a lot. Let me take a moment to summarize what we've discussed so far with respect to your relationship between nervous system and emotional eating. First of all, almost all of us have experienced overwhelming experiences in some form at some point in life. And these experiences have altered your nervous system by causing a state of dysregulation. You may be living in a constant state of survival and not even know it because you've just normalized to it. The third thing I want to point out is that living with a dysregulated nervous system affects your ability to navigate life and uncomfortable emotions. And this in turn causes a more exaggerated need for coping mechanisms like food. And number four, when your nervous system is dysregulated, survival brain takes over and begins driving your bus. This is in contrast, of course, to the more resourceful, capable prefrontal cortex. Survival brain is concerned about the quickest, easiest way to help you survive the next 2 minutes. It's not concerned about your long-term goals. It does not have access to your creativity and your problem-solving capabilities. It's not concerned how you'll feel in an hour or even in 30 minutes. It just wants to get you out of discomfort now. When survival brain is turned on, impulse control is compromised, and emotions feel more intense, more threatening than usual. And self-soothing or connecting with others, it's very difficult. And this is why it's so easy to turn to food in those moments. So for all these reasons, a key component of ending emotional eating is rewiring your nervous system so that you're not living and operating from survival brain. The million-dollar question then becomes, how do I switch out of survival and into calm aliveness so that I can get back in touch with my higher brain and act from a place of power? This is truly the million-dollar question, but luckily we have an answer. In a nutshell, working with your nervous system can take you from survival brain to higher brain. So if you want to stop using food to deal with life, take your health and take back your health, take back your power. You can't ignore your nervous system. Okay. As we end our discussion on the nervous system today, I'm going to invite you to do a little bit of integration work over the course of the next few days. The first invitation is for you to take a few moments and reflect on your life. Think about your typical day. How might things be different if you were living with a regulated nervous system? Can you imagine how different life would be if you didn't feel you were running from tigers all day? How much different would it be to feel resourced and capable instead of just trying to survive the day? Imagine how your eating habits would change when you feel calm and alive. Take a few minutes to journal about how life could be different. The second exercise is to check in with your nervous system at least 3 times each day over the next week and rate where your system is under our graduated cylinder model from 1 to 10. Where is your nervous system? And also take note of what are the circumstances under which, your nervous system is responding to everyday life. If you'd like to learn more about the comprehensive approach I've created to overcome emotional eating, visit lorimontre.com. And I just want to thank you for spending time with me today. And I really look forward to hearing your insights and your questions about this video and those that follow.